Welcome back. It's the Pat and Jer podcast. We're on like episode 5 or something. Maybe not. Maybe whatever. It doesn't really matter. We're just talking. We're good friends. We like to talk weekly to catch up, and we think other people might enjoy our conversations. I usually just come up with something that I want to talk about, and then I just bring it up, and Pat will respond, and we see what happens. So this week, and this has been something that's been on my mind a little bit, but I guess it got more popular last week with the news out of New York. Drug legalization, most particularly cannabis, but I feel like the trend is kind of moving towards more and more drugs over time, or at least decriminalizing them. A lot of the decriminalizing bills have psilocybin involved as well. A lot of the legalization ones do. They have it decriminalized, not like included in the legalization. Oregon, I think, legalized like all drugs or decriminalized all drugs. I believe Denver decriminalized quite a few as well. I generally like the idea of decriminalizing. I'm not against decriminalizing. I love decriminalizing. I'm generally for the idea of legalizing as well. But I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little annoyed of how it's being done for a couple of reasons. So, of all the policies that I've heard, New York actually has one of the better ones that I've liked. You can grow your own, which I think is a huge aspect of it. To say something's legalized but you can't grow it doesn't make sense to me at all. So having the ability to grow it definitely should be included, and New York did that as well. They have a big part of it, of the bill, goes towards releasing nonviolent offenders and erasing their records. I'm like blanking on what the word for that is. Expunging their records. Yep, exactly. They also have like money going towards communities that have been not benefiting from this drug war for so long to try and make up for it a little bit. So they have a lot of good things. But I don't like it for a couple reasons. One, it shouldn't have like many restrictions at all. I feel like if something's legalized, it should be treated just like soda is, or just like apple juice is, or just like a vitamin is. If I want it, I should be able to buy as much as I want of it. If I want it in this form or this form or this form, doesn't matter. I should be able to get it. And there shouldn't be any extra restrictions of who can sell it or who can buy it or how you can buy it and all of that. I just think that ends up making it so that rich person 1, 2, and 3 end up controlling the system and controlling all of the money. Still better than before, but it's just not a good situation. You don't have as many good products and all of that, and as clean products. Then my last thing before I get you, I don't like to talk for so long, sorry, but I don't like that. I've been talking shit on Cuomo for more than a year, actually, before COVID. And then when COVID happened, and I like to preface this a lot, I don't like Donald Trump. A lot of people think like when I defend aspects of it, or I like talk bad about like people who talk bad about him, I'm defending Trump. I'm not. I hate Trump. But I feel like a lot of people just gravitated towards Cuomo only because he was talking a lot of crap on Trump. And while it was happening in April, I wish I wrote more about it, but I would tell people, maybe I did right. I should like look around some of my posts. But Cuomo is basically a little version of Trump. He is a bully and a womanizer. Maybe not as bad as Trump. It's hard to be as bad as Trump. But he's a bully and a womanizer, and he was just loud in his complaints to Trump, and people just like forgot about his father's fraud, which he's not part of, but you got to be cognizant of people in his family who commit fraud, and his potential like frauds, and now that he's a womanizer. I feel like the legalization is just a distraction from that, and that's a little bit annoying. Legalization should have been done a long time ago, and it shouldn't be done to distract from other things. It should be done because it's the right thing to do. Let's hear your thoughts, Pat.
Yeah, I mean, likewise, a lot of the reopenings that are happening in New York are a distraction as well, but that's a whole nother thing. And, true. So he's, he brings up, he does one good thing, as far as legalization, but then, risks the health and safety of communities all over New York with the other. But so I agree with you. I think that if you're going to legalize something, yeah, like everybody should be able to grow it and consume it how they want to. For individual use, I agree with you. I think there should be very little, kind of roadblocks or whatever to like growing in your own home, in your own yard, whatever, consuming for yourself. I'm a big proponent of, consumer safety. So I think that there should be consumer safety mechanisms in place for the sale of it. Mm-hmm. So I'd like that to be not heavily regulated, but with an eye towards health, cleanliness.
I agree with you, and I don't want to cut you too much because talked for so long. But would you say that there's consumer safety in alcohol, and that it's done well?
I mean, alcohol, in my opinion, alcohol is inherently dangerous. So I think just alcohol being legal and then available to anyone, over the age of 21 is an inherently dangerous prospect.
Yeah,
like
I just feel like bars aren't supposed to serve you when you're wasted, but like I've never seen that rule applied.
Absolutely. No, I absolutely agree with you. I think that brings a larger conversation in how consumer safety in this country is absolutely ignored across the board. And so I wouldn't want pot to be treated any more or less strenuously than other aspects, but that doesn't necessarily make it right that there are industries that aren't regulated, that there isn't a recognition of the reality. For instance, people are constantly being overserved and then driving away from bars and restaurants. Okay, as far as it's just it's a part of human behavior that as you drink, your decision-making process go down as far as impulse control, the ability to critically think, depth perception, reaction time, everything. And so it's the government's role to protect people, sometimes from themselves and from others. And so likewise, I think that we need to be careful that, if we do legalize pot, that it's healthy pot. I just want it to be good pot. You know what I mean? And that's not to say that the government could come into your home and be like, you're not growing that right. I think that a person's body is sacrosanct, that the government shouldn't be telling you what's putting in, what you're putting into your body. But as far as selling it to other people, there does need to be some protections for us.
Well, I agree, but then the interesting thing though is I don't know if the government is the one who knows what is good or what's best. So in some states, there's a limit on your THC content. You can't have more than 10% THC because they think that's what's safe for consumers. THC content is not going to be a safety factor for consumers. What would be more of a consumer for me, what I'd be interested to know or I think is important is was it grown organically with pesticides?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Was it whatever, things of that nature? Having it limited on how potent it is not something that I think is keeping me safer.
So you bring up a really good point. That I think that oftentimes the government, especially when it comes to things that they inherently do not understand as a population, and I'm talking specifically about legislators who are oftentimes derived from the legal profession. And so, lawyers are a highly specialized profession. And so the areas in which they don't understand things or where they lack knowledge are broad. It's vast. And so I think the legislature cannot be the sole deciding body. It would take activists, consumer protection groups, botanists, agricultural reform activists, all sorts of individuals, food and safety type individuals coming together as a collaborative. Now that is a incredibly naive and idealistic vision of how a law would be made. But I think if we were going to do drugs right, as far as legalization, we would have to be collaborative because lawmakers don't know, like you said, Jer, like they don't even know like what pot is. They don't understand cannabis. They don't understand the difference between indica, sativa. They don't understand THC. They don't understand.
A lot of consumers don't even know. There was recently a viral video in like the pot community. I don't agree with this girl, but at the same time, I do understand what she was saying. She's a dispensary worker, and she said consumers always come in and they go, "Give me the pot that's the highest THC. I want the best pot. I want the strongest pot." And what she says it in like a snobby way though. It's like, hey, that's not really what you should do. She's like, a lot of what affects you, especially medicinally, if you're not just trying to get a high, but you're trying to like heal some things, is the terpene profile. Is there, the only one I can think off the top of my head is like limonene or whatever. But if there's this terpene and that terpene and this terpene, those will help you sleep. And if there's this terpene profile, it'll help you with pain management. This terpene will whatever, where THC is important. You feel that a lot, and I think that's why people like want the THC. But the other terpenes are important for how they affect you. And yeah, I think a lot of consumers don't even really realize that. And then what you mentioned, hey, Brownie, a lot of consumers like maybe know sativa or indica. That's a start, but there's a lot more involved, which also actually like brings me a little bit to like, so I want legalization, or I just want it to be like a little bit more open, but that I do actually think there is a need for like the FDA or whatever body it would be to kind of give structure to the naming. Right now, you have Cryptocrack-Chronolite, OG Kush, Platinum, whatever, the cookies, the V's, and you have, like that sour might be indica dominant, or a Kush might be indica dominant, or whatever it might be. But there should be, I think, a governing body that kind of says, like, this is how things are named, and this is how things are named. So you kind of know when you go into a dispensary in California, or you go into a dispensary in New Jersey, you go into a dispensary in New York, that the name that you're getting is an actual thing. You're not just getting what some grower decided to name orange cookies. Like, it's actually, no, this is the orange cookies. There's a genetic profile to it, which I think is on its way now that we're working towards legalization. Brownie, what do you think about legalization?
What do you think, Brownie?
She is so cute. What a good little girl.
What do you think? I think Brownie would probably say that, I think like philosophically too, we're kind of getting to it. We talked a lot about regulatory structure and like kind of how this is executed, which is kind of the devil's in the details, right?
Right.
But I think philosophically, the majority of adults realize that they should be able to dictate, what they're consuming, how much of it, the brands, the stuff, all that stuff like that. And I think as far as the government's role would just be to make sure we're getting the best quality stuff and that we know what's in it. I mean, like that's essentially should be their job. The rest,
should be on the market.
It should be the market, for sure. And I think the consumers will based off of what they want, and that will kind of dictate things. But it is important that there are certain considerations that are made in order to make sure that things don't get out of control. For instance, the whole like how much you can grow and like who can grow and stuff like that. As far as the sales aspect, look what happened in Oregon when it was like the Wild West out there, and they ended up having vast quantities of cannabis like rotting in barns and stuff because they didn't regulate, how much was coming to market and when, and surplus of a product can have devastating effects. So I think that, it's naive to think that the market will take care of everything, but it's a balance, right? And oftentimes it's kind of like you have to do an experiment and you got to see what works, what doesn't. I think what's interesting, because I think we both kind of agree on the philosophic part of like, legalization of pot. I wonder where we go from here with pot, but also with other drugs. And you mentioned kind of some of the other drugs.
I think psilocybin is gonna move very, very, very quickly. I've been following it quite a bit, so maybe that's why I think it. But I feel like I'm seeing more and more studies because there's a lot of medicinal benefits there seems to be with mental health for psilocybin, and I can't help but think mental health is going to be a serious issue in the coming years, where that we might see psilocybin and be like, yo, we don't even need to test it too many more. We got to just try it because we need like anything we can do right now. So I think that's going to be a close second, and I think there's a lot of value in that. I hope all drugs come next because I don't know if there's a lot of value in a lot of drugs, but I don't think there's value in making them all legal. There should be education and like policy to helping people if they get addicted, but not necessarily like criminalizing someone for anything, whether it be cocaine, crack, heroin, meth. They're all, to me, kind of the same. I listened to a book. I'm listening to a book, I think, by Terrence McKenna, and basically argues that like heroin is actually like is looked at a lot worse than it actually is because you see it on the street and like the people are like slumped over or whatever. But he brings up a point that I've kind of thought something similar to before. And I definitely like agree with it. And I don't understand. It alludes to something we actually mentioned too. Alcohol is the most dangerous drug.
Yes, it is.
And like right
Yes.
now in Philadelphia, I don't want to talk too long because we should we'll wrap this up. Well, maybe we'll talk about this more next week. We'll have
Yeah, I'd love to.
segue. But
Yeah.
there's like safe injection zones that are being promoted or proposed in certain areas of the city. A lot of people are saying, no way, we don't want that. A lot of those people don't mind having bars in their neighborhood, though. Bars kill a lot more people than heroin. Alcohol kills more people than heroin. And that's just an interesting thing that people are so adamantly against safe injection zones to try and help people get away from this thing that they don't want to do anymore. That's killing less people than alcohol, but people want bars in their neighborhood. More the better. But it's loud and it's destructive. It doesn't really correlate to me.
I know. It doesn't make any sense, man. And that's kind of where like socialization and integration of stuff, the proliferation of things in our society and how it's seen and who they see it in relation to goes a long way towards informing people's, conclusions. And if you grow up with alcohol and cigarettes being perfectly acceptable in society, then you're not going to think it's a big deal. But, crack and heroin, while dangerous, that's the point here, is that they are dangerous. All drugs are incredibly dangerous. Oxycontin is incredibly dangerous. Putting a person under general anesthesia is incredibly dangerous. Like, that's why you want to have highly specialized, educated individuals dictating, kind of the rules of the road and educating people. And there's plenty of treatment for those that kind of go off the rails with them. But let's face it, you make something illegal, you create a black market for it. There is no possibility of regulation. There is no possibility of general education. There is no possibility of confirming what are in these substances, what they actually are. And so bring it into the light. Let's bring it into the light. Let's save a bunch of money from locking people up for simply putting a substance in their body. And with one fell swoop, we will take away the biggest financiers of drug cartels and terrorist organizations around the world.
I'm for it. Pat, that's a great way to close. I love it. It was so awesome to talk to you as always. It was so nice to get to see my little brownie too. Love seeing her cute little face. And I will make sure, or I'll see you next week.
Awesome.
Have a good rest of the night. Tell your family I say hello. And I'll see you soon, baby. Love you.
See you soon, bro.